Hey, good morning guys, Tush coming at you. Sunday, April 26th, just after 10 o'clock in the morning. And it's moving day today for this 59 TR3A, which means I need to do some rearranging, cleaning, whatever you want to call it. The first thing I got to do is I'm going to cut that frame in half. That's a frame off the parts car. I just want to keep it just in case I need any little bits from it, but after my 250 project, we'll just get rid of it. I got some tires to move and a few other things, so this is where the 59 will sit for a few months probably until I can get back to it. And I got to clean the backyard out, move the snow blowers and the lawn mowers around and that kind of thing. So that's what we plan on doing today. So I'll get at it. All right, we got it back outside. What I did is I dug the old, I don't know if you remember, I did a practice painting carbon fiber hood. Didn't do any body work on anything, just was just more or less just practice painting. So I just threw that hood on here just to give that a little bit of protection. So they hooked that rad hose up on the bottom. Alright, so we're ready to push her back and put a cover on it. See you in a bit. Alright. Here's where she'll sit for a bit. It's next to the house. And we'll get her tarped up. We'll get a car cover on it. And it should be good for a little while anyway. Alright guys. Alright guys, that should be safe and sound. Doesn't look too bad. Doesn't look like an eyesore anyway. Fortunately I have a pretty good neighbor, so they don't complain. I'm well on my property. So that's a good thing. Anyway, one more job down. Nice and tight, won't blow in the wind. So we're good. I have to say that these pump jacks are awesome. I will say, however, that they're an absolute pain in the ass when they're actually not jacked up under something. They're always in the way. Anyway, just thought I'd mention that. So just taking a quick inventory and look at a bit of a disaster of interior panels for this car. So we'll have to make a decision at some point what we're going to do. Yeah. I was hoping to be able to, between two cars, find some cappings that would be okay. The only problem is they're different color reds. I know it's hard to tell with all the dirt on them, but this is from the race car, and this came out of the car, so I guess we'll have to clean them up and see how we're doing. Obviously this red is quite different from the rest of the reds. So anyway, we'll see what happens. I think I might even actually have some leather, some red leather from the race car downstairs, so who knows, maybe that'll match. So we'll find out. Anyway, the dash is a bit of a mess too. It's got a bit of a curve in it. I do have another dash face in the shed, so we'll probably have to use that. I think it's in better shape than this one. So anyway, just taking an inventory. We're just going to give it a quick wipe down, and we're going to move it inside the house or into the basement or into the shed just to get it out of all this dirt and grime in here and paint over spray. So we'll get it dusted off and we'll move it inside after we take an inventory of it. Alright guys, we're just hanging out in the garage. It's about 9:45 on Sunday night, and we just got the 60 uncovered and we're just having a quick look at it, and it's nice having the extra space in the garage. So what we're going to do is we're going to move that 60 over more towards the center of the garage and put it up on stands in preparation for a long list of to-do items that need to be checked off on this car in the next little while. So we're going to go ahead and get a start on that. So I thought I would take you through what the plans are as far as this car is concerned in the next, like I said, the next few weeks, months. I don't know how long this is going to take. It's going to depend a lot on my work schedule and how often I can be out here in the garage tinkering around. So some of it's going to be weather dependent, so that will That will come into play along the way as well. So I think I'll just go through my list here of, and I'll just have a little chat as we go along of the things that still need to be done on this car. So number one is exhaust. I started working on the exhaust last year and sort of gave up because I don't have the ability to bend exhaust piping. So I need to go to a specialist, an exhaust place that can help me finish off building really just the midsection of the exhaust. I have the rear muffler and tips installed. It's really just the center pipe that goes through the chassis that I need to have help bending. So I think what I'm going to have to do with that is I'm going to have to throw the car on a trailer, I think, and take it up to the exhaust place and get them to put up in a lift, and I'll sort of walk them through what I want them to do. The windscreen seal packing. So I've got the glass in the windscreen. It's still in there a little bit loose, and one of my viewers suggested that I should go back and have a look and redo the packing around the windscreen and use the packing that the factory would have used. I just basically used a nylon tape around the outside of the glass, and I'd read that on some car forums that was kind of an acceptable thing to do. Obviously the glass is still a little bit loose in the channels, and that could potentially crack, so we're going to go back through and we're going to redo the packing around the windscreen and get the, I think it's called the glazing strip. We'll get some glazing strip and do that properly. So the windscreen is going to come apart again, and we'll redo that. I talked a little bit before on the 59 that I was working on about the shims in the rear axle. So I definitely want to check the rear axle end float in this car. I didn't do that. I didn't have a dial indicator at the time, so I really wanted to check the rear axle end float. I think I mentioned to you I have a bit of a binding issue when this car rolls, so it's potential that maybe the splines are binding in the pumpkin. So we will check the end float of that. It's a little bit of a pain in the butt because I'm going to have to take the brake back plates off to put the shims in. So that'll be a little bit of work to do that, but it's got to be done, so we'll get on to doing that. The front brake caliper exchange, I mentioned in my previous videos that this car actually has the wrong calipers on it. It came with these calipers. I don't know if you can see that. Those are the correct calipers, and for some reason I thought that they should have the earlier set of calipers that have the cross tube on them. So I've got the calipers for the 59 on this 60. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take those calipers off and I'm going to swap them with that set over there. So that shouldn't be too big of a deal, although it's going to mean that I'm going to need to re-bleed my brakes. So I didn't actually put that on here, so I'll just put it as part of point number 4. Binding issue we talked about, so that's going to check, I'm going to check the bearings while I'm in there doing the brakes. So I'm going to check the front wheel bearings to see if there might be something hanging up in there. I'm also going to check the hub grease seals to make sure that I've got them in the right direction. There's sort of two schools of thoughts, and it's a little confusing on which way the grease seals go on these cars, whether they go into the hub or whether they go against the actual actual vertical link. They should actually, in my mind, go against the vertical link. So we'll just have an inspection of that. I believe this car, the previous owner, had the felts installed in towards the hub, so I'm probably going to want to switch that out after doing some research. So we'll have a look at that when we get there. Again, who knows, that could be causing a binding issue with the bearings as well. Fastener check, that just basically means I want to go through the entire car again when I've got it up on jack stands, and I just want to check and retorque everything that I've done in this car. You got to remember that I started this car, this is my journal here, so let me just go back to one of my journal entries, and let's see here. I don't want to bore you, but Tuesday, January 27th, 2009 was when I started this restoration, so it was some time ago. So I just want to it's been a long time, obviously a long restoration, so I just want to go back through and make sure that everything is torqued correctly, just to do a final check. It'll make me feel better when I'm running down the road doing 60 or 70 miles an hour on the freeway. Just a little bit of peace of mind there. Fluid check. I just wanted to make sure all the coolant levels are good. The engine oil is good. The tranny is good. The diff's good. All that kind of stuff. Just want to do that again. We want to grease all the fittings on the car. Just go through that and give them a good couple pumps of grease. The driving lights on this car are not hooked up yet, and there was a reason for that. I knew I was probably going to have to do some rework on the paint, and I'll get to that in a minute. So I'm pretty sure that bumper is going to have to come off in order to get the fenders off, for example. So I didn't wire those lights up yet, so we'll have to do that as well. It's not critical. I mean, I can run without driving lights, but I'd like to do it while I'm putting it back together. So those have got to be wired up. At the same time, I've got point number 11 here, the electric fan. And again, the electric fan is installed and all the wiring and the relays are there. I just actually have to hook it up to a power source. We do have a secondary fuse box in this car to get some additional power, so we'll just have to get the fan and the driving lights hooked up through relays to that secondary power supply. Cooling leak. I've noticed that I've got a small puddle of water on the ground. I actually haven't put coolant in the car yet, so it's just water leaking on the ground. I think one of the hose clamps on one of the pipes is loose, so we'll have to sort of figure out where that leak's coming from before we get too far with it. Carb rebuild. I don't know if some of you might recall that I was having some issues when I was trying to start this car for the first time, and I ended up going back from a rebuilt set of carbs that I did, and I ended up going back to the old set of carbs that were on this car when it was racing. So they don't look great. They do leak a little bit of fuel, although I haven't checked lately. It's possible that the cork seals in the carbs now have swelled up enough and the leak has stopped. But I want to check that and go through the carbs and possibly make them look a little bit better, because they were less than spectacular looking, let's say. The rebuilt set I have is much better looking. They're much shinier, but they don't perform nearly as well on this car as the old race car carbs do. So we'll just have to do a little bit of fiddling around with those and do a quick rebuild on those. The vent flap on this car is a bit of a pain in the butt. That is the fresh air vent on this car, which is here. There's a seal under here, and that's why I haven't striped this yet. There's actually a rubber seal under here that's a little too thick, needs to be trimmed a little bit, and there's a really fiddly little mechanism in there, let's say, that I need to work around and get probably some smaller fingers in there to get the mechanism attached and working properly. So that's sort of still a work in progress as well. Alright, we can flip the page. This could be a long video. The most talking I've done in a long time. Okay, the next page I've got, number 15, is wheel balancing, wheel paint, and polish. So we decided that we were going to go with the Cosmic rims on this car. These are obviously seen better days. They could go with a good polish and they could go with a good paint, but I want to make sure that these rims are balanceable before I go to the bother of refinishing them. So we're going to take those up to the tire store and see if they'll balance before we put any work into them, and that will make our decision for us then. I think they still look pretty good on the car. I'm happy with the way they look, and just I'm sure they'll look better once they're painted and polished. Like I said, we'll just make sure that they balance first before we go ahead and do that. So I noticed that when we moved the car out of the garage last year, that I've got a pretty serious alignment issue on the front end. This has a steering rack conversion, a rack and pinion conversion on this car, as opposed to the steering box that I showed you on the 59, which is the old worm and peg type steering. So it's a much improved steering on this car. The only issue is that really you're starting from ground zero as far as alignment is concerned. So I'm going to try the string method to see if I can get the alignment a little better along the front end. I will take a video of that and we'll see how that turns out. I know the alignment is extremely far off right now. When I was pushing the car in and I got into the garage, which is a little bit sandy and sort of gritty or grainy on the floor, I could feel the front tire sliding on the passenger side here, so far out of alignment. So it's really sort of pushing. It's really really towed out. Side screen fitment. So I have never put the side screens on this car yet and fitted them with the convertible top up. So that will have to happen at some point. I've got to get the side screens on the car fitting in case we run into some bad weather and we need to install the side screens. So that will be a little bit of a tinker, a little bit of a, I understand they can be a little challenging to fit properly, so I'm not really looking forward to that. Alright, paint is number 18, and I've got the 3 exclamation marks. And you're saying, well, the paint looks pretty good. Well, I told you last year that I had an issue with the door color. And when I start looking at the car, there's more than the door paint color is the issue. I had paint mixed twice for this car, and you can really see that that there is a difference in parts on this car. So the body tub is a different shade of white. I don't know if this is going to come through in the camera at all. It probably won't. But the body tub is a different shade of white than the actual hood or bonnet. And it's a different shade from the door. So I've got some pieces that match, some pieces that don't. So white is a really difficult color to match. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to have to do pretty much a whole respray on this car. I don't really want to do that. I think what I'm going to do first, here's the plan of attack, is the last 2 panels I painted was the hood and the front apron. And if I could get away with keeping those 2 without having to repaint them, I'd be really quite happy, because that would save me a lot of disassembly. The front end is quite detailed as far as getting that apron off and getting all the badging and the lights and all that stuff out. The hood would be great if I could get away without doing that, but I think the rest of the car will have to be painted. So that means disassembly pretty much of all the panels, the doors. Obviously the inner panels from inside the doors need to come off, so the interior is going to come out. What interior I do have installed is going to come out, because I've got to paint the tub, and I prefer to actually take the interior out versus leaving it in if I'm going to paint the tub. So going to be a lot of work going into disassembling this car again, keeping parts, fasteners straight, and keeping panels from getting dinged or dented along the way. So that's going to be a bit of a process, and remember I had mentioned weather dependent. So it's going to be depending on the weather when I can actually get to painting this car. So if the weather gets a little warmer, I'll be able to paint. But obviously before I paint, we're going to have to sand this back down to 600 grit after we clean it, degrease it, grease and wax remover, when we'll have to sand it down to 600 grit so we can respray the white base coat and the clear coat. So it's going to have a fair amount of paint on this car, unfortunately, but I've got to do it. I don't want to be embarrassed when somebody asks me who painted this car. I want to be, I'm not going to say proud of it, but I don't want to have to offer any excuses. So we're going to make it right. It is going to be a lot of work, but I definitely want to make it right, so we're going to do it. Anyway, so back to the list, point number 19 is wet sanding. So obviously it will need to be wet sanded and buffed after the paint. So that brings us down to point 21. I noticed that, and I've got that listed as tonneau studs. I noticed that when I was trying to fit the tonneau cover, that this stud here should actually be longer, because there's a foldable flap that goes over the top. And I actually had a couple of long studs, and I'd wondered what they were for. So I quickly found out what they were for after I tried to actually snap this on, and because of the double thickness, it won't actually snap. So we'll have to install some longer studs in there. That's a fairly quick fix, and I'll do that actually when I disassemble the interior to do the paint. Getting towards the end of the list. We got a few more to go here. The trunk backing, there's actually a cardboard, and I'm not going to say cardboard, it's a wood board that goes back in the trunk that sort of blocks off the fuel tank. That's got to be installed. I've got to get the car appraised for insurance purposes, so that's got to happen at some point. We have to get the car's safetied up here and for us to be able to get a license plate sticker and for it to be legally on the road, so that'll have to happen at some point. Tranny tunnel fitting, I've got that sitting over here, and that's obviously got to be cleaned up again, and that's got to be painted as well. The reason I haven't installed the tranny tunnel is because I wanted to test the operation of the overdrive unit before I installed the tranny tunnel. Those can be a real pain in the butt to install, so I wanted to wait and make sure that I didn't have to take it out to service the tranny if there's an issue with it. So that'll be a bit of a bitch. Not looking forward to that. After obviously I reinstall the tranny tunnel, I'll have to finish the interior. The carpeting that goes over top of the tranny tunnel will have to be reinstalled, as well as the rest of the interior that I take out when I do the painting. So there's not a lot of fit and finish on this car to do in the interior, so it shouldn't be too bad. The last thing I wanted to do, and this is not critical, but I just threw it on the list anyway. Since these tires are wider than stock, I was thinking of going to a 3M clear film. In some of the lower extremities of this car, I was thinking of doing a film maybe across the bottom here to keep some of the rock chips off the paint on the front fenders at least. You got a bit of a stone guard here, which is good, but again, these tires are just a little bit outside, and you can probably see that from that angle. So I think I want to put a little bit of chip guard here, just that clear chip guard along the back here to stop from some of the stones from tearing up the paint on the sides of this car. Again, not critical, but something I want to do, and I may as well do it when I get it on the road so I don't have to go back and repaint again. So anyway, that's about it, guys. This is obviously a long video, but I want to just go through that list so you guys knew what I was up to, or what I will be up to in the next few weeks, months, however long it takes me to run that list down. I'm sure I'll add to the list as well. Hopefully not too many more items than that, but I think I've captured everything for now. Anyway, we'll upload this, and we'll get out here tomorrow, and we'll get this car up on stands, and we'll start trying to check stuff off the list. Alright guys, have a good night. We'll see you tomorrow.